The alarm bells rang across the bridge of the UE's Defiant as Captain Jake Morrison rushed from his quarters. The sound meant only one thing. Someone was sending a distress signal from deep space. Jake had been exploring the outer rim for 3 years now, and emergency calls were rare this far from civilized space. "What do we have?" Jake asked as he stepped onto the bridge. His crew was already at their stations, fingers moving quickly. Over control panels. "Signal coming from Haven Station, sir," reported Lieutenant Sarah Walsh, the communications officer. "It's Commander Lisa Rodriguez. She says it's urgent." Jake knew Lisa well. She was one of the best diplomats humanity had stationed at Haven Station to handle trade negotiations with alien species. If Lisa was calling for help, something big was happening. "Put her through," Jake ordered. Lisa's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired and worried. Behind her, Jake could see the busy corridors of Haven Station, filled with aliens from different species, all looking nervous. "Jake, thank God you're out there," Lisa said quickly. "We have a serious problem. 2 alien empires have contacted our colonies. They want us to pick a side in their war." Jake felt his stomach drop. Humanity had only been in space for 50 years. They had a few colonies and some trading posts, but they were still new to galactic politics. Getting involved in an alien war was the last thing they needed. "Tell me everything," Jake said. Lisa took a deep breath. The Andorian Empire and the Zelthran Coalition have been fighting for over 200 years. Yesterday, both sides sent messages to our colonies. They want military alliances. They're saying if we don't pick a side, they'll consider us enemies. Jake watched as Lisa brought up images on her screen. The first showed tall, reptilian creatures with green scales and yellow eyes. They wore elaborate armor and carried weapons that glowed with blue energy. "These are the Andorians," Lisa explained. "They're proud warriors with advanced energy weapons. They think they're superior to everyone else in the galaxy. Their leader, Emperor Malthrax, has been ruling for over a century." The next image showed insect-like beings with multiple arms and large compound eyes. They moved in perfect coordination, like a hive of ants. "The Zelthrans are different," Lisa continued. "They're like a giant hive mind. One queen controls millions of workers and soldiers. They have incredible numbers and can coordinate attacks better than anyone." Jake studied both images. Neither species looked friendly. What started this war? Mining rights in the Kepler sector, according to official records. "But Jake, I've been digging into this. The war stopped being about resources a long time ago. Both sides have been fighting so long, they don't remember how to do anything else." On Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan was having the worst day of her career. She sat in the emergency meeting room, deep inside the Human Defense Council headquarters. Around the table sat the most important military and political leaders of humanity. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Admiral Sullivan said, reading from a tablet. "Both alien empires have given us exactly 1 week to choose a side. If we ally with the Andorians, the Zelthrans will attack our colonies. If we side with the Zelthrans, the Andorians will destroy us. And if we refuse both, they'll work together to wipe us out." General Susan Clark nodded grimly. "That's right, Admiral. Our intelligence says both empires have technology centuries ahead of ours. The Andorians have energy weapons that can destroy our ships in one shot. The Zelthrans have so many ships, they could overwhelm our defenses through sheer numbers." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Murphy, the youngest person at the table, cleared his throat. "If I may, Admiral, I think we're looking at this wrong." Admiral Sullivan raised an eyebrow. Ryan was brilliant, but sometimes spoke without thinking. "Go ahead, Commander. We've been assuming we have to choose between the 3 options they gave us. Ally with the Andorians, ally with the Zelthrans, or fight both. But what if there's a 4th option? Which is? Asked General Clark. Ryan stood up and activated the holographic display in the center of the room. Images of alien ships and battle. Formations appeared in the air. Look at their fighting patterns, Ryan said, pointing to the display. The Andorians always attack in straight lines, using their superior firepower to break through enemy defenses. The Zelthrans always swarm their enemies, using numbers to overwhelm them. They've been fighting each other the same way for 200 years. Admiral Sullivan was beginning to see where Ryan was going. You're saying they're predictable. Exactly. They know how to fight each other, but they don't know how to fight us. We developed our military tactics fighting ourselves. Humans have been at war for thousands of years, not with aliens, but with other humans. We learned to be sneaky, to use tricks, to hit enemies where they don't expect it. Dr. Helen Parker, the head of alien psychology, leaned forward. There's something else. Both empires have been at war so long, their entire societies depend on it. Their economies, their governments, their cultures. They can't stop fighting because they don't know how to exist without war. Admiral Sullivan stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the lights of the city. Millions of humans going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire species was about to be thrust into a galactic war. So what are you suggesting? She asked without turning around. Ryan took a deep breath. We don't pick a side. We end the war. The room fell silent. General Clark was the first to speak. End a war that's been going on for 2 centuries? Ryan, they have thousands of ships, weapons we can barely understand, and they control half the galaxy. But they don't have what we have, Ryan said quietly. Which is what? Admiral Sullivan asked, turning back to face the room. They don't have the ability to think outside their own patterns. The Andorians can only see strength through superior weapons. The Zelthrans can only see victory through numbers. But humans, we've learned that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to make sure the fight never happens. Admiral Sullivan looked around the room. Every face showed a mixture of fear and doubt. What Ryan was suggesting was either brilliant or completely insane. How long do we have? She asked. 6 days, General Clark replied. Admiral Sullivan made the decision that would change galactic history. Get me every ship captain, every intelligence officer, and every tactical expert we have. If we're going to do this, we need to be smarter than 2 civilizations that have been perfecting warfare for centuries. She paused and looked at each person around the table. And if we fail, humanity becomes extinct. So we're not going to fail. Far away on Haven Station, Commander Lisa Rodriguez watched alien ships positioning themselves around human colonies. Both empires were preparing for war, confident that the primitive humans would choose a side and become useful allies in their ancient conflict. Neither empire had bothered to study human history. If they had, they would have learned that humans had a long tradition of finding unexpected solutions to impossible problems. They would have discovered that when humans were cornered, they didn't just fight back. They changed the rules of the game entirely. Colonel Steve Patterson had been in the military for 25 years, but he had never faced a challenge like this. Admiral Sullivan had given him the impossible task of planning a war against 2 alien empires at the same time. Both enemies had better weapons, more ships, and centuries of experience fighting in space. Steve sat in his office at 3 in the morning, surrounded by stacks of reports and empty coffee cups. The walls were covered with pictures of alien ships and battle formations. He had been studying the enemy for 3 days straight, and what he found was both terrifying and encouraging. The problem is that we're thinking like them, Steve said to his computer as he recorded his daily report. We're trying to figure out how to build better weapons or faster ships. But that's not how humans fight. Steve pulled up a file on his Screen showing battles from human history. The Battle of Hastings, where arrows defeated knights. The Revolutionary War, where farmers beat professional soldiers. World War II, where codebreakers were as important as generals. Humans don't win by being stronger, Steve continued. We win by being smarter. We win by cheating. The next morning, Steve called a meeting with his best tactical officers. Major Claire Thompson arrived first, carrying a thick folder of intelligence reports. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Carter came in next, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Captain Danny Walsh was last, still wearing his flight suit from a training mission. I've been studying our enemies, Steve began, and I think we've been asking the wrong questions. Instead of asking how we can beat them, we should be asking why they can't beat each other. Claire opened her folder and spread out photographs of alien ships. The Andorians have been fighting the same way for 200 years. They line up their ships in formations and blast away with energy weapons. They always attack from the front because they think it shows courage. That's stupid, Danny said bluntly. Any human pilot would attack from behind or from the side. Exactly, Steve said, but it's not stupid to them. It's their culture. They believe that facing your enemy directly is the only honorable way to fight. Ben pulled out his own reports. The Zelthrans are different, but just as predictable. They always attack in swarms, using their numbers to overwhelm the enemy. But they need their queen to coordinate the attack. If something happens to the communication between the queen and her soldiers, they get confused. Steve walked to the whiteboard and drew 2 circles. Here's what I think is happening. The Andorians are warriors who value honor above victory. The Zelthrans are a hive mind that values coordination above individual thinking. They've been fighting each other for so long, they've forgotten there are other ways to fight. Claire looked at the circles. So what's our way? Steve smiled for the first time in days. Our way is to make them fight each other while we clean up the mess. Major Claire Thompson was in charge of gathering intelligence about the enemy. She had spent the last week reading every report about alien behavior that humans had collected. What she found was fascinating. The Andorians have never developed good defensive systems, she explained to her team. They put all their energy into building bigger guns and stronger armor. But they have almost no protection against small, fast attacks. Her assistant, Lieutenant Amy Johnson, pulled up a tactical display. That's because the Zelthrans always attack in massive formations. The Andorians learned to fight against thousands of ships coming at them at once. They never learned to fight against a few ships sneaking around behind them. Claire nodded. And the Zelthrans have the opposite problem. They're so used to overwhelming their enemies with numbers that they don't know what to do when someone attacks their command structure. On the other side of the base, Lieutenant Colonel Ben Carter was working on the most controversial part of the human strategy. His job was to figure out how to attack both alien empires at the same time without letting either one realize what was happening. The key is timing, Ben explained to his planning team. We hit both sides at exactly the same moment. If we attack the Andorians first, they'll warn the Zelthrans. If we attack the Zelthrans first, they'll tell the Andorians. But if we hit both at the same time, they'll think the other side is behind the attack. Captain Nicole Brown, one of Ben's best strategists, looked worried. That's a big risk. If they figure out we're behind both attacks, they'll stop fighting each other and team up against us. That's why we have to be smart about it, Ben said. We don't attack their main fleets. We attack their supply lines, their communication centers, their support systems. We make it look like the other side is using new tactics. Meanwhile, Captain Danny Walsh was working on the most important part of the entire plan. His job was to turn every human ship into a weapon of war, even if it wasn't built for fighting. The aliens think in terms of warships versus warships. Danny explained to a group of civilian ship captains. They have big, expensive ships with powerful weapons. We're going to have lots of small, cheap ships with whatever weapons we can bolt onto them. Captain Lavra Martinez, who normally commanded a cargo hauler, raised her hand. Danny, my ship carries grain and medical supplies. How is that supposed to fight alien warships? Danny grinned. Lavra, your ship is perfect. It's fast, it's maneuverable, and the aliens won't see it as a threat until it's too late. We're going to put missiles on your cargo ship and use it to attack their supply convoys. The room buzzed with excitement as the civilian captains began to understand the plan. They weren't going to build a traditional navy. They were going to turn their entire merchant fleet into a swarm of fighters. Dr. Helen Parker was working on the psychological aspect of the war. Her job was to understand how the aliens thought and find ways to use that against them. Both alien species have been at war for so long, they don't remember what peace looks like, she explained to Admiral Sullivan. Their entire cultures are built around fighting. Their governments, their economies, their religions. Everything depends on the war continuing. Admiral Sullivan frowned. That sounds like it makes them more dangerous, not less. Actually, it makes them vulnerable, Helen said. They're so focused on fighting each other that they can't imagine someone wanting to end the war completely. They'll keep trying to get used to pick a side because that's the only solution they can understand. Back in his office, Colonel Steve Patterson was putting together the final pieces of the human strategy. He had reports from all his teams, and he was beginning to see how it might actually work. The human plan was unlike anything either alien empire had ever faced. Instead of building a bigger army, humans were going to use the aliens' own strengths against them. Instead of trying to destroy both empires, humans were going to save them from themselves. The Andorians want honor, Steve said to himself as he wrote his final report. The Zelthrans want unity. We're going to give them both, but not in the way they expect. Steve looked at the clock. In 3 days, the human fleet would launch. In 4 days, the longest war in galactic history would begin to end. And it would all start with humans doing what humans did best, refusing to play by the rules. Captain Danny Walsh checked his watch one more time. In exactly 30 seconds, the war would begin across 12 star systems at once. His small fleet of converted cargo ships was hiding behind an asteroid field, waiting for the signal. Danny had never been in a real battle before, but today he was going to attack the most heavily defended military station in Andorian space. All ships, this is Danny, he said into his radio. Remember, we're not here to destroy Proxima Station. We're here to make them angry at the wrong people. 23 human ships acknowledged his message. Most of them were cargo haulers and passenger ships that had been quickly fitted with weapons and armor. They looked nothing like proper warships, which was exactly what Danny was counting on. The signal came right on time. Go, 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 Danny ordered. But instead of flying toward the massive Andorian fortress, Danny's fleet turned toward a group of unmarked ships that was quietly moving. Supplies between the Andorians and their supposed enemies, the Zelthrons. Human intelligence had discovered something amazing. While the two empires were fighting their public war, they were secretly trading with each other in private. Danny's ships opened fire on the supply convoy. The unmarked vessels tried to run, but they were slow and heavily loaded. Within minutes, Danny's fleet had captured 3 ships and destroyed 2 others. Most importantly, they had recorded everything. Did you get it all? Danny asked Lieutenant Mark Davis, his intelligence officer. Every bit of it, Mark replied, looking at his screens. Trade agreements, payment records, even personal messages between Andorian and Zelthran commanders. This is going to cause some serious problems. 3 star systems away, Commander Amy Johnson was leading her own attack on a Zelthron mining operation. But like Danny, she wasn't really interested in the mine. She was interested in the Andorian technical advisors who were secretly helping the Zelthrons improve their equipment. Amy's fleet surrounded the mining station before anyone knew they were there. The Zelthron workers tried to fight back, but their weapons were designed for large battles, not close-range combat in asteroid fields. "Attention Zelthron Station," Amy broadcast. "Surrender now, and we won't harm your civilian workers." The Zelthron commander was confused. These human ships were attacking them, but they were also offering to protect Zelthron civilians. That didn't make sense according to anything the Zelthrons understood about warfare. While the Zelthrons tried to figure out what to do, Amy's boarding teams were already inside the station. They moved quickly through the corridors, looking for the hidden Andorian advisors. They found them in a sealed section of the station, working on weapon designs that were supposed to be Zelthron military secrets. "Smile for the camera," said Sergeant Bob Wilson, as he recorded the Andorian engineers working on Zelthron equipment. "This is going to be very interesting when your Emperor sees it." Back on Earth, Dr. Helen Parker was watching reports come in from all 12 battle sites. Everything was going according to plan. Human forces were not just attacking both alien empires. They were uncovering evidence that both empires had been lying to their own people for decades. The secret cooperation goes back almost 50 years, Helen reported to Admiral Sullivan. Both governments have been telling their people that they're fighting a total war for survival. But they've actually been working together to control trade, share technology, and keep their populations focused on external enemies instead of internal problems. Admiral Sullivan nodded as she watched the tactical displays. Human losses were minimal so far, mainly because they weren't trying to destroy alien forces. They were trying to embarrass them. "How are the aliens reacting?" she asked. "Exactly as we predicted," Helen said. "The Andorians think the Zelthrons hired humans as mercenaries. The Zelthrons think the humans are Andorian allies. Both sides are preparing to attack each other with even more force than usual. At the Battle of Cygnus Prime, something unprecedented was happening. For over a century, Andorian and Zelthron fleets had met at this location on the third Tuesday of every month to fight a carefully choreographed battle. Both sides would attack, exchange fire for exactly 6 hours, then withdraw with roughly equal casualties. It was war as theater, performed for the cameras of both empires. Today was different. As the two alien fleets moved into their traditional positions, Captain John Peterson's human squadron appeared from behind a gas giant. The human ships were small and fast, nothing like the massive vessels the aliens were used to fighting. "All human ships execute pattern Omega," John ordered. The human ships split up and began attacking both alien fleets at the same time. But instead of trying to destroy the alien ships, they were targeting communication arrays and sensor systems. Within minutes, both alien fleets were partially blind and unable to coordinate with their home bases. Admiral Zekthos of the Andorian fleet was furious. "These human ships are clearly Zelthron allies," he announced to his officers. "The insects have hired primitives to do their fighting for them." On the Zelthron flagship, Queen Vesara was equally angry. "The humans are obviously working for the lizards," she told her subordinates. "This is typical Andorian trickery." Both alien commanders ordered their fleets to ignore the humans and focus on destroying each other. The battle that followed was more violent than any engagement at Cygnus Prime in decades. Both sides used weapons they had been saving for special occasions. Convinced that their enemies had escalated the conflict by hiring human mercenaries, Captain John Peterson watched. The alien fleets tear each other apart, while his small squadron stayed safely out of range. "Mission accomplished," he reported to Admiral Sullivan. "Both alien fleets are heavily damaged, and they're blaming each other for our attack. Meanwhile, General Sam Roberts was coordinating the most dangerous part of the human plan. Teams of human special forces soldiers were infiltrating the command centers of both alien empires. Their mission was not to destroy these facilities, but to plant computer viruses that would cause chaos in alien communications. Sergeant Lisa Brown led the team that broke into the Andorian command center on Proxima 7. The facility was heavily guarded, but the guards were looking for large assault forces, not small teams of humans trained in stealth tactics. "Remember," Lisa whispered to her team as they crawled through ventilation shafts, "we're not here to blow anything up. We're here to make their computers lie to them." The team reached the main computer core without being detected. While Lisa's soldiers stood guard, computer specialist Private Tom Garcia plugged his device into the alien system. "How long will this take?" Lisa asked. 2 minutes to upload the virus, then we're out of here," Tom replied, his fingers moving quickly over his equipment. The virus was a masterpiece of human computer engineering. Instead of destroying the Andorian communication system, it would change small details in messages. Military orders would be altered slightly. Intelligence. Our EPORTS would contain false information. Most importantly, evidence of secret cooperation with the Zelthrans would be accidentally broadcast to Andorian news networks at the same time. Sergeant Mike Thompson was leading a similar mission against the Zelthron Command Center. The insect-like aliens used a completely different type of computer system, but human programmers had learned to work with alien technology during 50 years of trade and diplomacy. "Virus uploaded," reported Private Jenny Martinez. "Their communication system will start malfunctioning in about 6 hours." As the human teams escaped from both command centers, the third phase of the human plan was already beginning. Admiral Kate Sullivan had prepared a special broadcast that would be transmitted to every inhabited planet in both empires simultaneously. The message was simple but devastating. Complete records of secret cooperation between Andorian and Zelthran governments. Video evidence of joint military exercises. Financial records showing how both governments had been profiting from the war while their people suffered. Most shocking of all were the private communications between Emperor Malthrax and Queen Vexara discussing how to maintain the war indefinitely, to prevent their populations from demanding better living conditions. "People of both empires," Admiral Sullivan's voice said in the broadcast, "you have been lied to for generations. Your governments are not enemies. They are business partners. And their business is keeping you afraid and angry while they get rich." The broadcast ended with detailed technical specifications for converting military factories to civilian production, showing both populations exactly how they could have peace and prosperity if their leaders stopped the artificial war. The reaction was immediate and explosive. On both sides, populations that had been told they were fighting for survival learned they were actually fighting to make their leaders wealthy. The war that had lasted for centuries was about to change forever. Lieutenant General Matt Davis stared at the economic reports spread across his desk. 3 weeks had passed since the first human attacks, and the war was changing in ways nobody had expected. Both alien empires were starting to fall apart, but not because of military defeats. They were collapsing because their economies were breaking down. "The problem is simple," Matt explained to his staff during the morning briefing. "Both empires have spent 200 years building their entire societies around making weapons and fighting wars. They don't know how to make anything else anymore." Captain Nicole Brown, who had been studying Zelthran colony reports, nodded in agreement. "The Zelthran worlds are running out of food because all their farming equipment was converted to military use decades ago. They've been importing food from neutral traders, but those supply lines are breaking down." Major Rachel Adams pointed to a chart showing Andorian industrial output. The Andorians have the same problem. They have factories that can build the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, but they can't make basic things like medical equipment or communication devices for civilians. Matt stood up and walked to the large display screen, showing both empires. This is our chance. We're not going to destroy their military forces. We're going to replace them. The new human strategy was unlike anything in military history. Instead of conquering territory, human forces began offering services. They arrived at struggling alien colonies, not as invaders, but as helpers. Captain Nicole Brown commanded the first humanitarian mission to a group of abandoned Zeltron colonies in the Outer Rim. These worlds had been left behind when the Zelthran military moved resources to more important battlefronts. The colonists had been surviving on emergency rations for months. "Attention Zelthran colonies," Nicole broadcast as her fleet approached. "This is Captain Nicole Brown of the Human Relief Force. We have food, medical supplies, and communication equipment. We're here to help." The response from the Zelthran colonists was immediate and desperate. "Human ships, this is colony leader Zix Ara. We have sick children and our food processors broke down 3 weeks ago. Please help us." Nicole's ships landed on the main colony world and began unloading supplies. But they didn't just bring food and medicine. They brought something the Zelthrans had almost forgotten existed: technology designed to help civilians instead of hurt enemies. "These are farming machines," explained Lieutenant Kevin Torres as he showed the colonists the human equipment. "They can grow more food in 1 month than your old equipment could grow in a year." The Zelthran colonists were amazed. They had been told for generations that all advanced technology was needed for the war effort. They didn't know that machines could be built to help people instead of fighting people. But Nicole's mission had a secret purpose. The human ships also carried communication equipment that allowed the isolated Zelthran colonies to talk to each other directly, without going through military command centers. For the first time in centuries, ordinary Zelthrans could coordinate with each other without asking permission from Queen Vexara. They began sharing resources, trading goods, and most importantly, asking questions about why their government had abandoned them. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Captain Lavra Martinez was leading a similar mission to Andorian worlds. The proud warrior culture of the Andorians made the situation more complicated, but the basic problem was the same. Entire planets were struggling because all their resources had been diverted to military use. "We cannot accept charity from aliens," declared General Korthik when Laura's fleet arrived at the industrial planet of Andoria Prime. "It would be dishonorable." "This isn't charity," Lavra replied calmly. "This is trade. We'll give you civilian technology and food supplies. In exchange, you give us information about Zelthran military positions." The Andorian general was confused. Humans were supposed to be primitive, but they were offering technology that was more advanced than anything the Andorians had for civilian use. And they were asking for military intelligence about the Zelthrans, which suggested they were Andorian allies. "Why would you help us fight the insects?" General Korthak asked. Laura smiled. "Because we want the war to end quickly. The faster both sides get the intelligence they need, the faster someone will win." What General Korthak didn't realize was that Lavra was making the same offer to Zelthran commanders on the other side of the battle lines. Humans were giving both sides intelligence about their enemies, but they were also giving both sides the tools they needed to survive without constant warfare. Dr. Helen Parker was monitoring the psychological effects of the human strategy from her office on Earth. The reports coming in from both empires showed that something remarkable was happening. "The artificial scarcity is breaking down," she explained to Admiral Sullivan during their weekly meeting. "Both governments have been keeping their people dependent by claiming that all resources must go to the war. But now humans are proving that there are plenty of resources for everyone. Admiral Sullivan looked at the intelligence reports. What's the reaction from the alien governments? Panic, Helen said simply. Emperor Malthrax has ordered the execution of any Andorian caught accepting human aid. Queen Vexara has recalled her military forces from the front lines to suppress rebellions on her own worlds. The situation was getting more violent, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of fighting humans, both alien empires were starting to fight themselves. Major Rachel Adams had discovered the most important piece of information yet. Hidden in captured Zelthron data files were the technical specifications for clean energy technology that could power entire planets without pollution or resource depletion. They've had this technology for over a century, Rachel reported to Lieutenant General Matt Davis. But it's been classified as a military secret. Only weapons factories are allowed to use it. Matt stared at the technical diagrams. What about the Andorians? They have similar technology, but theirs is even more advanced. They could provide unlimited energy to every planet in their empire, but they keep it restricted to military use only. The implications were staggering. Both alien empires possessed the technology to create paradise for their citizens, but they deliberately kept it secret to maintain artificial scarcity and dependence on government resources. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Carter was coordinating the most sensitive part of the human operation. Teams of human engineers were secretly installing the alien clean energy technology on abandoned colony worlds, then broadcasting the technical specifications to anyone who wanted to listen. We're not stealing their technology, Ben explained to his engineering teams. We're giving it back to the people who should have had it all along. The results were immediate and dramatic. Zelthran colonies that had been struggling to survive suddenly had more energy than they knew what to do with. Andorian worlds that had been rationing basic necessities found themselves with abundance for the first time in generations. But the most important effect was psychological. Citizens of both empires began to realize that their governments had been deliberately keeping them poor and desperate to maintain control. Captain Danny Walsh received an urgent message while resupplying his fleet at a human base near the neutral zone. Danny, this is Admiral Sullivan. We're getting reports that Emperor Malthrax is planning to use planet-killer weapons against Zelthran worlds. But our intelligence says he's actually targeting Andorian colonies that have been cooperating with Zelthran traders. Danny felt sick. He's going to destroy his own people? It gets worse, Admiral Sullivan continued. Queen Vexara is planning a similar attack. Both leaders would rather destroy their own colonies than admit they've been lying about the war. The final phase of the human plan was about to begin. Both alien empires were on the verge of civil war, and their leaders were desperate enough to commit genocide to maintain power. But humans had one more card to play. Admiral Kate Sullivan was preparing a broadcast that would end the longest war in galactic history in a matter of hours. The countdown had begun. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the main communication center on Earth, watching the largest collection of human ships in history prepare for what might be the final battle. But these ships were not armed for war. They carried the most powerful weapon humanity had ever created, the complete truth about the galactic conflict. All stations report ready, announced Lieutenant Sarah Walsh from her communication console. We have confirmation from every human ship in both empires. The broadcast network is ready. Kate looked at the clock on the wall. In 5 minutes, she would begin a transmission that would reach every planet, every space station, and every ship in both the Andorian Empire and the Zelthron Coalition simultaneously. The message would change everything. Begin transmission. Kate ordered. Her voice went out across the galaxy, carried by human ships that had positioned themselves near every major population center. The aliens had built their communication networks to carry government propaganda. Today, those same networks would carry the truth. Citizens of the Andorian Empire and the Zelthran Coalition. Kate began. My name is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Human Defense Council. For the past month, human forces have been active in your space. Today, I want to tell you why. On thousands of worlds, billions of aliens stopped what they were doing to listen. Most of them had never heard a human voice before. Your governments have told you that we are allies of your enemies. Both Emperor Malthrax and Queen Vexara have claimed that humans are working for the other side. This is not true. We are working for you. The first part of Kate's broadcast was a complete technical manual for converting military equipment to civilian use. Weapons factories could be changed to make medical equipment in 3 days. Warship construction facilities could build passenger ships and cargo vessels instead. Most importantly, the broadcast included step-by-step instructions for installing the clean energy technology that both governments had been hiding. Commander John Peterson was monitoring alien reactions from his position near the Andorian capital. World Admiral, we're seeing massive crowd gatherings on Andoria Prime. The civilians are demanding access to the energy technology. Captain Lavra Martinez reported similar news from Zelthran space. The worker hives are refusing to return to weapons production. They're saying they want to build the civilian equipment from the human broadcast instead. But Kate was just getting started. The second part of her broadcast was even more devastating. For over 200 years, your leaders have told you that the war between your empires is necessary for survival. This is a lie. I am now going to show you proof that your governments have been working together to keep this war going. The evidence poured out across the galaxy. Financial records showing joint investments between Andorian and Zelthran corporations. Military communications revealing coordinated battle schedules designed to create casualties without achieving victory. Most shocking of all were personal video messages between Emperor Malthrax and Queen Vexara, discussing how to keep their populations focused on external enemies instead of internal problems. In one particularly damaging recording, Emperor Malthrax could be heard saying, "As long as the insects keep attacking our outer colonies, our people won't ask why we spend more money on the military than on schools and hospitals." Queen Vexara's response was equally revealing. "Yes, and as long as the lizards keep threatening our trade routes, my hives won't question why we need so many soldiers and so few farmers." Dr. Helen Parker was watching the psychological impact of the broadcast from her monitoring station. "The reaction is incredible," she reported to Admiral Sullivan. "Both populations are experiencing what humans would call a collective nervous breakdown. Everything they believed about their societies is being proven false in real time." The third part of Kate's broadcast was the most important. She began transmitting the complete technical specifications for advanced technology that both governments had been keeping secret. Not just clean energy, but also medical devices that could cure diseases thought to be incurable, agricultural systems that could end hunger on any planet, and communication technology that would allow ordinary citizens to coordinate without government interference. "This technology belongs to you," Kate said as the technical data streamed across the galaxy. "Your governments have had these solutions to your problems for decades. They chose to keep them secret because solving your problems would make you less dependent on them." Emperor Malthrax was in his throne room when he received reports of the human broadcast. His advisors told him that riots were breaking out on 17 Andorian worlds as citizens demanded explanations for the hidden technology. "Destroy the human ships," he ordered his military commanders, all of them, immediately. But when the Andorian military tried to attack the human vessels, they discovered something unexpected. The human ships were surrounded by Andorian civilian vessels. Citizens were using their own ships to protect the humans who were broadcasting the truth. Queen Vexara was having the same problem. When she ordered her military to stop the human transmissions, her own worker hives refused to follow orders. For the first time in Zelthran history, the hive mind was breaking apart as individual Zelthrans began thinking for themselves. Captain Danny Walsh was commanding the defense of the human broadcast station near the Andorian border when he received the most surprising communication of his career. Human ship, this is General Korthak of the Andorian Third Fleet. I request permission to join your formation. Danny was confused. General, you're supposed to be attacking us. I was, the Andorian general replied. But I have been listening to your admiral's broadcast. Everything she says is true. Emperor Malthrax has been lying to us for our entire lives. I will not fight to protect those lies anymore. Similar messages were coming in from Zelthran commanders across the galaxy. Military officers who had spent their careers fighting for what they thought was their people's survival were learning that they had actually been fighting to protect their leaders. Power and wealth. The cascade of defections happened with stunning speed. Within 2 hours of Admiral Sullivan's broadcast, more than half of both alien militaries had declared they would no longer follow orders from their governments. The war that had lasted for over 2 centuries ended at exactly 1437. Galactic Standard Time, 3 hours and 17 minutes after Admiral Sullivan began her transmission. Emperor Malthrax was arrested by his own guards when he ordered them to destroy Andorian colonies that were refusing to send resources to the military. The guards realized that the Emperor was willing to kill his own people to maintain his power. Queen Vexara simply disappeared. When her hive mind collapsed, the individual Zelthrans found that they didn't need a queen to coordinate their activities. They could work together through choice rather than biological compulsion. Captain Nicole Brown was among the first humans to land on a former battleground planet in the neutral zone. She found something remarkable. Andorian and Zelthran soldiers, who had been shooting at each other that morning, were working together to build refugee camps for civilians displaced by the war. How did this happen so fast? She asked through a translator to a young Andorian soldier. We discovered that we were never really enemies, the soldier replied. We were just tools being used by people who wanted to stay in power. Once we learned the truth, there was no reason to keep fighting. The galaxy-wide celebration lasted for weeks. Planets that had been devastated by 2 centuries of warfare began the process of rebuilding. But they weren't rebuilding the same societies that had created the war. They were building something new, based on cooperation instead of conflict. Admiral Kate Sullivan received delegations from both former empires, asking humanity to help them establish new governments based on truth and transparency rather than fear and control. We have learned something important, she told the assembled alien representatives. War is easy to start, but hard to stop. Peace is hard to start, but easy to maintain. The choice is always yours. The longest war in galactic history had ended not with the destruction of one side or the other, but with the recognition that both sides had more in common with each other than with the leaders who had been sending them to die. Humanity had won their first galactic war by refusing to fight it.